All right, so I'm gonna revise my timeline. Garth did not show up at the pad a week later. It was only a matter of days because the last time I had seen my homeboy was on Valentine's Day, right? And I was supposed to call him back when I felt better so that they could pick me up. But for the next few days after that, I wasn't picking up my cell phone. I wasn't answering the calls, nothing, right? Because I was on this trip with all these, things that I was experiencing, right? So I didn't want to see anybody, didn't want to talk to anybody. Um, and so here I am in handcuffs, right? They walk me up the stairs, open up the room. They want to know where I sleep, where my possessions are at. So they go in and search that area. When you're on parole, they can only search the immediate area of where you're staying at. They can't go into anybody else's bedroom. They can't go into your brother's room, your sister's room, your son's room, only your room, right? Um, so they go in and they search, and I had I had forgotten about some weed I had in a little baggie, some glass pipe, weed pipes. I think I had a couple of R's, some syringes still left in there. Um, and so they really didn't have much, right? I would have I got worried when they opened up a CD case that I had, and some CDs had gang writing. So that's the one that I was worried about because I had already, done a 10-month violation for violating the gang stipulation for being at my tia's house, at my aunt's house, you know, with my nephew. And they tried to give me a year for that and I ended up taking 10 months. Um, and so that's what I was worried about. I'm like, man, I'm going to have to go do another year, another 10, 11 months. I already did 10. So I knew that they weren't going to give me anything less than that, right? Because they're like, oh, I didn't, in their eyes, I didn't learn my lesson. I was violating, my parole. So I'm like going, damn, man, I'm going back for another probably a year, you know? So I'm all, just added to my depression, to the stress, everything that I, was already going through at the time. And so when they take me to the car, you know, and they take me to the Vista detention facility, they didn't take me down to where the normal intake area is, to be processed. At the Vista jail, you go in, they park at the bottom, and they have an automatic door that slides open. Boom, they tell you to, you walk in, they tell you to face the wall right there. And that's where they would take off your shoes, take off your belt, any jewelry, all your property, your wallet. Boom, goes in a little baggie right there, and they say they take inventory, you sign, you talk to the nurse, and then they put you into a holding cell, and then from that holding cell, you go to another holding cell. And then from there, um, you go into another cell where you're able to use the phone, right? It's a free phone. So that's the time, you want to contact everybody that you want to get a hold of, because once you leave that tank, it's collect calls from there on. Um, And then when you're in there, that's when they take you out and they'll fingerprint you. They do all that and they run your background, see if you've committed any crimes in any other states. It's nationwide, right? And then they take you upstairs eventually. It takes a long time to go upstairs. This time, they didn't take me that way. They took me through the top, around the back, where, like all the cop cars are detectives and they have offices up there and stuff, you know. And they had never done that before. Um, They had only done that one time. I've only was there one time, and that was when I got arrested in 2001. Um, that's when I did my 3 year, almost 3 year, 30 months. Um, that's a whole nother story. I jumped out of Shorty's right there on East Drive by Salsa Market, man. I panicked, jumped out of a window, and just started walking out. I had a gang of money on me, threw the dope that I had on me. Um, But at that time when they arrested me, they took me up there because they were counting all the money, and they asked me, "Where'd you get all this money?" Right? And I was like, "I just got paid. You know, it's where I work. Who you work with?" And I was like, "My dad." My dad at the time had a landscaping business. You know, and they called. And I was like, "Go ahead, call him, ask him." You know, he just paid me. You know, and they tried calling, and he didn't pick up. But there was nothing they could do. So I had all that money on my books anyway. Um, so from that, you know, from that point on, I knew that everything was like different. Everything was, it just seemed off, you know, um, because they weren't booking me, you know, the way they had always booked me. And so they walked me in, boom, and then they sat me down in like a little closet with like a little handicap bar right above the bench, and they handcuffed me to that, right? So I'm sitting there, got my head down because I'm just tripping out still. Like, what the hell's going on? I thought, you know, things were supposed to get better, right? And so through my peripheral, I see somebody walk by, and I kind of do a quick glance like that, and then I heard the squeak from the shoe. He came back and he looked in, and all I heard was, "Jaime, what are you doing here?" And I looked up, and it was Big Red, Detective Dinger. Detective Diener, you know, was started off in Vista with a canine, and so since back in the day, he used to like, man, he used to give us a hard time. He used to run from that fool, you know. He was gaffling everybody, and then he worked his way up, became detective and stuff, right? Narcotics. So he sees me. What are you doing here? And I told him, I just looked up to him. I looked up at him and I said, you know what? For the first time in my life, I don't know what I'm doing here. All I know is that I gave my life to God 4 days ago, and now I'm here. And I don't know what's going on. And he had the same look, the same look, the look that my mom had on her face. He had the same look. Like, he was saying, "What?" Like I was crazy, right? He was like, "All right, well, good luck with that," and took off. And so I was just like, man, the cops don't even, the cops think I'm crazy, right? So eventually, they end up taking me upstairs. They take me to Upper West, right? And I go inside the holy tank, and I'm like, man, I come out for breakfast, 4 a.m., right? I eat, or actually, yeah, I eat. Just went out there, grabbed my tray, and I ate inside my room because I was the new guy. You know, all the tables, there's only a certain amount of tables, so you got to wait your turn. You know, you got to wait till a seat opens up till someone leaves. And so I went and ate in my room. So I didn't have I had no idea of who was in that tank. Um, and so boom, I wake up at in the morning um for lunch. They pop the doors, boom, right? Dave, people are out there. And then so I go out there and I sit, and I look. I just sat down, you can see the cart for lunch. I just sat down at a table and I looked and I ended up seeing also from Encinitas. And when I saw him, um, I was glad because also was a Christian. All right. Also, I had done time with him a couple of times, and he was one of the guys I always used to give a hard time to. Um, I would always walk up to him and be like, "Hey, fool, why you smoking cigarettes for? Aren't you a Christian?" And he'd be all embarrassed, because there's this, you know, this thing about Christianity that you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do it. But so I would just give him a hard time, right? And I would be like, "Hey, fool, verse 2." Every time I see him, be like, "Verse 2, fool." And then I'd laugh, and he'd laugh, and then I'd be like, "Hey, you got a light? Can I have a cigarette?" Anyway, so I see also, and I ran over, sat down. I'm like, "Also, what's up?" And he was like, "Bugzy, what's up?" And I'm like, "Hey, bro, you're never gonna believe what happened to me." And he's like, "What happened?" And I start telling him my story, right? What's going on? And we had his, he was eating as I'm telling him. He puts the sandwich down, looks at me, and he goes, "Bugzy, I used to pray for you, bro." And I'm like, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Thank you." That's all I could say. That's all I could say was thank you. Um, so he goes, "You know what? I'll be right back." And he ran upstairs, man. His cell was on the top tier. And so he comes out and he gives me this New King James Study Bible, right? A thick one, brand new, still wrapped up in plastic, right? And he goes, "Someone gave this to me a couple days ago." He goes, "I didn't need it. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with it." He goes, "But now I know. It's for you. Read it. Take it with you and read it." And I was like, "All right, bro, thank you. I will." And that night, when you know, took it to my cell, and I was up pretty much all night, man, till almost like 2 in the morning. And started reading it, man, and I had read the Bible before, here and there when I was locked up, um, and I never really understood it. You know what I mean. But this time, when I was started reading it, I understood it. You know, it was like speaking to my heart. It was crazy. And so the more I read, the more I wanted to read it, right? And then something weird happened again. The guard called me. They have intercoms inside the cells, right? Ayala. I'm like, "Whoa, what's up?" They're like, "Roll up." I'm like, "Roll up? Where am I going?" They're like, "Roll up." Man, what the hell's going on? So boom, they pop my door. I have to get my mattress or my bedroll, all that stuff. Boom. They take me out, take me downstairs. I'm in a holding tank, right? Well, I find out that they're taking me downtown Central, right? San Diego. I'm like, "What?" And I'm only on a violation, right? So they're taking me down. Boom. And I get to downtown San Diego, middle of the, morning. As soon as I hit the tank, I crash out for a little bit. I get up, and there's a dude knocking on my door. And they're like, "Bugzy from Vista?" And I was like, "Yeah, excuse me." I was like, "Yeah, what's up?" And they're like, "Here, it's for you." And they slide a kite bottom of the door. You know, they were sending their greetings, Cubo. And I forgot who it was. It was a little kite. But inside that kite, there was a paper of heroin, right? Someone was shooting me some heroin. I said, "We heard you're here, blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, boom, read it. So I grab it and start looking. I look at this heroin, right? And I'm like, man, I'm tripping out. That never happened before, right? Again, everything that's happening has never happened to me. So I'm trying to put two and two together on what's going on. I'm trying to understand everything that's going on. And so I flushed the heroin and I flushed the kite, and I remember coming out that morning. It was on Thursday. I ended up coming out that morning and I jump on the phone, because I wanted to call my grandma. And I call my grandma and I start telling her what's going on because my grandma was religious. She was a Christian woman, man, you know, whole life. And I start telling her what's happening, that I'm locked up. She knows I'm locked up because I'm calling her collect. But after I tell her what happened, she goes, "You know what, mijo?" She said, "God is testing you. If what you're telling me is the truth," she's like, you have to obey." In Spanish, she was telling me these things. She's like, "You have to listen to him. You have to honor him, honor his words." She's telling me, "Read the Bible." And I was like, "Okay, abuelita, okay, I'll see you when I get out." And so I hung up, right? So I'm like, "Man, God." So I'm thinking like, man, the heroin was a test. It's all a test. And so at lunchtime that day, they end up they knock on the door, bah, 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 on the side, and I'm talking to somebody. I don't even know who it was. Um, but apparently, whoever had the block, they wanted me to take the block. They wanted me to take the tank, to run the tank. And I was like, man, I'm just here on a violation. I'm not even going to be here that long, because I didn't want it. You know, these guys don't know I'm a Christian. Nobody knows I'm a Christian yet, right? Um, and so they're like, all right, whatever. So I'm like, damn, man, that's crazy. I don't even know who's at downtown, right? But they want me to take the block. Um, Anyways, that night I end up getting rolled up again, and they take me to George Bailey. So I spent the weekend at George Bailey. I ended up rolling up, going to Donovan on that Monday, right? And that's where I knew, you know, that was it was going to be hard, um, because I felt vulnerable, right? Because my ego, that ego of who I was, I didn't have that ego anymore, and I felt weak. Um, I had never felt like that, feeling weakness, in that sense of, having a reputation, being respected, all that was gone. I knew that the people I was gonna see in there, all the homies that I had done time with that knew me, that respect was gone. Um, I knew that my peers weren't gonna look at me the same way, and that hurt. Because up until that point, I had been working towards. Think about it. It was like a career. You know how you go. Whatever career path you take, you're working hard in order to be promoted and promoted so that you can grow, in whatever field it is you have an interest in, right? It's called your career goals. Well, I had career goals as well. It's pretty much, we look at things the same way. I had a goal, and I wanted to be like my Uncle Toro, you know? I wanted to be like that. And I'll get into some of that later. Um, and I had orders to report to the shoe, by one of my older was who I was in the hole with at Donovan in 2001. Um, that could be a whole nother story, but um, yeah, he was on his way up for I think 22, 23 years. He's like, yeah, I want to see you. I want you to check in, and that to me, that was like an honor. I'm like, all right, you know, one day, one day I'll get there, right? But you know, all of that was going to be thrown away. As soon as I got to Donovan and said I'm a Christian, right? That was one of the hardest decisions, I had ever made in my life up until that point. Because I felt like ashamed, Um, but nonetheless, because of the change that had taken place inside of me, like I knew I couldn't, I couldn't, I couldn't deny it to myself. And I knew at that point, the chips were gonna fall where the chips were gonna fall. So I get there to Donovan, right? And there's the black dude, the porter that was right there on the floor. He comes by my cell and he asks me, "Hey, who do you roll with, right? Who do you run with?" And now he's like, "You a Southsider?" And I'm like, "Nah, bro." And I'm like, "I'm a Christian. I'm gonna roll with the Christians." He goes, "Oh, me too, right? I'm a Christian too, bro." I was like, "Really cool." So he goes, "I'll be right back." Goes down, whatever, goes downstairs to his cell, and then he comes back up and he gave me some of these like some little pamphlets, the Bible studies that they were handed out there. And he's like, "Yeah, they have church here on this day, blah blah blah. If you're still in this building." you want to come out? Yeah, I'll come out. And he said, hey, you want to walk with me to chow? And I'm like, damn, here it goes, you know. And I would walk with him to chow, and I could feel the eyeballs, you know, on me, because as a Mexican, as a sureño, you know, the blacks just, the blacks are considered our enemy, you know. It's the way we're raised, you know, very you know, racist. I was racist, you know, and then in prison it's all segregated. You know, the only people that we get along with, that we do anything with, are the whites and the paisas now. You know, the blacks, you can't eat with them, you can't do business with them. You keep it cordial. You know, you show respect. You know, give them their respect, they give us our respect, until, you know, they disrespect, or there's some sort of power struggle that's going on or whatnot. You know, then it pops off. But other than that, um, I had never walked with the black dude on the yard in prison, right? But here I am. And I could just feel the hate. Um, I could feel that. I could just feel it, man. And I was just not gonna lie, man. I was scared. For the first time in my life, I was scared, you know, of what could happen to me. Um, but I ended up running into Manuel from Encinitas, right? And I had done time with Manny before, a few times. And I had just recently done time with them in Jamestown. I had already been up there in Jamestown on Mariposa Yard, on the level 2 yard. That's the only level 2 with gun towers. It's Sierra Conservation Center in Jamestown. That place that was fun. That was the best 30 months I ever did, um, because it was up north, and it was cracking up there. But um, I had just done time with Manuel, right? And he knew me, and he sees me and he's like, "What are you know, hey, what are you doing, bro? Why don't you come?" And I end up sharing, you know, after we eat, because you can, and reception, you can't pick who you sit with. It's automatic. It's like these 4 people, boom, next 4 people, next 4 people. And there, you know, there'll be a black guy, boom. If you don't sit down with the homies and you're with the other, you have to hurry up and eat as quick as you can and bounce, you know. And but he would see me walking with him. He's like, "What are you doing, bro? You know, hey Holmes, what are you doing?" And I ended up sharing my story with him, right? And he looked at me and he goes, "I can see it in your eyes, Bugzy." And I'm like, "Yeah, bro." He was like, "It's real, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "All right, right, that's cool." And then that was that, right? So I ended up getting moved to the 2 yard, okay? And that's where I ran into my homeboy Clumsy, to Robert. If you see this, bro, you know, thank you, you know, um, just for showing me love, dude, because it was hard. I knew a lot of people didn't like me anymore, but you didn't judge me. You were like, it's cool, you know, and you still worked out with me. You know, you didn't care. You were kicking it with me still, and that meant a lot to me. So I appreciate that, man. I've never had the chance to tell you that, but I remember telling Clumsy too, like, man, this what happened. He was like, dang, I can see it, you know. And I told Robert, I told him, I was like, you know what, Robert, you're never gonna see me here again, you know, because I already knew, like, I was done. That was it. You know, I was there to be tested. I just had to roll with it, you know. And because I knew, although I was scared, I was all these things, I knew I was gonna make it out the other side. You know, I just needed to get out, and that was it. And I just need that one chance at life, you know. So um, from there, I end up getting moved. Right. I mean, I'm in one building. You know, before that, let me back up, because there's an incident that happened right there. And so I'm there, I don't know how long I was there, but then all of a sudden there was like there was some commotion on the yard, right? And one of the homies that I knew, I forget who it was, but he says, "Hey, fool," he's like, "Be trucha, be careful." I'm like, "Why? What's up?" They're like, "Hey, fool, I heard they're trying there's someone here, that they want to hit you, you know, because you're a Christian." And I was like, "What?" And I'm like, "Go right." He didn't know who. He had just heard that I was supposed to get whacked, right? So I'm like, "What the?" And I'm like, "Go," you know what I mean? Um, and so I'm out. We're out on the yard one day, and after I work out, I'm walking laps, by myself. And all of a sudden, I hear, "Hey, Bugzy," and it's this individual from Escondido, right? And I think if I recall correctly, me and this guy had it was almost an altercation between both of us. But he didn't want anything to do. He didn't want to throw hands. He didn't want to do nothing. He didn't want to handle it. Um, but then he hits me up on the yard, right? He's like, "Hey, fool." I'm like, "What's up?" And he said, "Are you a Christian?" Right? He got up in my face, and people that were around, they backed up. Right? Everybody, they just back up. Boom, 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 boom. It's just me and him. He was a little smaller, a little shorter than I was. So I'm looking at him, right? And I'm mad at this point. Like I want to take off on this guy, you know, for coming up to me like that. But he's like, "Are you a Christian?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a Christian," and I'm looking at him eye to eye. And he's like, "All right, Holmes, I better not see you here again," right? So I'm like, "What?" And he walks off. It took everything inside of me to not go off on this dude, man. I wanted to lay him out, because that was the first time anybody had ever done that. And I felt like, I felt like a coward. I felt embarrassed, and I felt, I would say, like vulnerable, and kind of ashamed, you know. But at the same time, I knew I was humbling myself, you know. And for the first time, I was controlling my emotions, you know. Um, Now there's a thing, there's this thing that they call emotional intelligence, to where you're able to identify your emotions that you're feeling at that moment, at a particular moment during any situation. You're able to identify, you know, what you're feeling, right? And as you identify those feelings, you're able to come up with a strategy on how to cope with that emotion that you're feeling at the moment, right? And then once you do that, you know, you you're also thinking about the consequences, you know, of what a good decision, of the consequences of a good decision, and then what the consequences could be if you make the bad decision, right? And then you execute, right? Which means you act, or you make a decision, um, based on what you decide to do with that emotion, right? And all these things, you internalize these things. Well, I was internalizing. I was thinking, if I do that, then I'm I won't be, giving off the right image, right? I'm saying I'm a Christian. I can't just take off on this guy, because also then, it wasn't in me. I wanted to, but like that part of me, like I didn't want to do that. At the same time, there was this conflict going on inside of me, but I knew what the right thing to do was, and that was just to let it go. And I let it go. And so by the time I kept walking laps, man. By the time I was thinking about it, out inside, I felt proud of myself. Like, you know what? I didn't just react, the way I used to, because I ended up, if I would have taken off on him, the yard would have went down. I would have went to the hole and picked up time. You know what I mean? And so I felt proud of myself, right? When I go back to my cell that day, whatever, boom, let it go. And then, so so after that, I'm like, already, well, I have to watch my back. I'm scared because I don't know who to trust, besides Robert, the only one I trusted. And that's because, we're almost like family. He was from Karen Road like me. And the Karen boys, you know, we had a different kind of bond than just the regular Vista homeboys, although we were VHB. Karen Road, that's where, it's old school. And so I'm scared. I'm like, man, I'm thinking, anytime I walk out that cell, I could get hit. I probably wouldn't even see it coming. So um one day my cell door, they ended up moving me from two, I think I was in 2 block to 5 block or 6 block. I don't remember. I end up moving. They tell me to move though. Roll up, you're going to a different block. And I'm like, what? So I grab my stuff and I go over there and they put me in my new cell, right? So I'm in a new cell, I'm in a new building. I don't know who's in that building, right? And so they pop my door. Boom. I walk over and I slide it open a little bit and I look at the CO in the tower and I'm like, what's up? And then over the intercom, boom, go down to cell, I think 225 or 125 on the bottom next to the shower in B section. I was in A section, if you guys know, it's a 270 building. So when you walk in, you walk in the Sally port, you're staring at B section, and then there's C on your right, and then A section on the left, right? So he was down straight. He was the next cell where the shower is, so 125, I think. They told me to go down there, right? Boom! They popped that door, and I'm like, oh man, here it is. Thinking I'm getting whacked, right? But nevertheless, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna face this like a man. You know what I mean? I'm gonna go down there, see what's up, whose cell that is. So I go down there, and I'm scared. My heart's like beating. As I walk up, they have a single window, a small rectangular window. You can see through the door. And as I'm walking up, approaching the cell, I can see somebody standing up, and they're facing the other way. Their back is towards me, right? I'm like, okay, so that kind of like I put my guard down a little bit because if it was someone ready to whack me, they wouldn't have their back facing the door. They would have been sitting on the desk right there, waiting for me to come in. And I walk in, and I shut the door. Boom! And I don't know who it is, but right when I shut the door, homeboy turns around, and it's Cleto from Mesa, right? And when I saw Cleto from Mesa, I was I was confused. But at the same time, I was like happy because I had known Cleto for a long time, man. We did time together, and then not just that, but I knew Cleto before we even got into the gangbang, stuff. When we were kids, you know. My parents got divorced. My mom, we moved over to Grapevine Road, and I was friends with Cleto's younger brother. He was a little older than me, a couple years older than me, and he liked my sister. But this is before gangbanging. It was back in like 89, 90, 89. Mm-hmm. And we ended up running into each other, you know, in the system later on. He's from Mesa and I was from Vista. And we had done time together. So it's him. And I'm like, what's up, Cleto? Shakes my hand, give him a hug, and he's like, I'm gonna cut your hair, fool, because I had my long hair. It started getting long because I was on this this trip, man. I wanted to grow my hair long, right? Like the dudes in the Bible, right? Um, he's like, you gotta cut your hair, bro. And I was like, all right, right. So I'm like, the only thing on my mind was like, this fool has a the way they cut your hair in there is that they get the razors, which is contraband. You're not supposed to have, and they put it in a comb and they cut your hair, right? So I'm like, this fool, I'm gonna have to sit down. So he wants me to sit down on the desk that's facing the window, and he's standing up behind me to cut my hair. So I'm like, he's either gonna freaking slice me or he's not, right? So I sit down and he's like, so what's up with you? I'm hearing things, right? And he starts cutting my hair. He's like, reaction. He starts cutting. So I start telling him my story. Boom. And at the end of my story, he had finished cutting my hair. I'm shampooing in the sink, boom, 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 washing up, gives me a towel. And he goes, you know what, Bugzy? He goes, I could see it in your eyes, bro. It's real, huh? And I'm like, yeah, bro, it's real. I'm like, I'm telling you, bro, I'm tripping. And he goes, all right, don't let me see you back here again, right? And he goes, also, he goes, I have another question. And I'm like, what's up? He goes, what's up with you? And he says homeboy's name, right? The homeboy from Esco. So I tell him what's, our history, the history between me and that guy, and why I believe, why I, I tell him what I think his motive is, right? And why he did what he did, you know. And it was all over. He ends up telling me that he asked him permission. Well, I find out Gleto had the yard. He was running 2 yard at the time, right? And so homeboy had went and asked permission to whack me, right? It was all based on him seeing me at a drug connections house that was no good. Um, he at that time they were saying he was a rat, that he had snitched, whatever, but he was slinging dope. He was slinging heroin, right? Everybody used to go sling dope, right? And this was a well known family um, on Karen Road, and my sister, was actually with them at that time. She was living there with them, and I happened to when I bump into this guy there when I first started getting high again. I was out of maybe a couple weeks, and I was over there, and he shows up, you know, and then that's what I brought up to Pt.2 too. I'm like, homeboy was there too, so I don't know how he's trying to make a case on that being the reason why. But I told him I think it's because now he saw an opportunity. I was a Christian and he knew I wasn't going to do anything. And so he tried to make something out of nothing to make himself look good, to save face, you know. And so Pt ends up telling me, you know what, bro? He goes, that's why I called you in here. He goes, I got you moved over here because I wanted to talk to you, to find out what was going on. He's like, because from what he was saying about you, he's like, it didn't, his story, it didn't fit, the things that he was trying to say, but he stopped him. He said he stopped him in the middle of what he was saying. He goes, bro, I don't even want to hear it. He shut it down. That's why he ended up trying to stay face on the yard, because he was going around, talking smack. Um, And so I told Cleto, you know what, thank you, bro, for giving me this opportunity to explain what's going on. I go, and I told him the same thing that I told Robert. I said, you know what, you're never gonna see me in here again, Cleto. This is it, bro. I don't even know what I'm doing here, But I had explained to him how I had given the dirty test, because he was asking me, why are you here then? Dude, I gave him the dirty test in January, man. It's February. Um, and so, yeah, I ended up staying. I got moved from the 2 yard and ended up doing my violation on the 3 yard. That's where I stayed. And I ended up going to the parole board. And you know, rather than giving me the whole 12-month violation, they ended up giving me 4 months, 4.5 months. I did, or 5 months, So I ended up because I ended up doing the remainder of my time. I did like 2.5 months on the 3 yard. Um, and that's a whole nother story, you know. Um, but that's where I ended up meeting. I was going to the Bible studies there, and I ended up meeting Art Blajos. So if you guys know who Art Blajos is, he's the ex-Mexican mafia killer, you know, that's a that got saved, went to Victory Outreach, and now he's a preacher. But I remember meeting him there, and after his after he gave a message, I went up and talked to him and kind of shared, like gave him a summary of what happened to me, and he gave me the name and contact of someone from Victory Outreach Vista, and he was like, when you get out, contact this person, okay? And I was like, all right, bro, we'll do. And anyways, that was it. Once I got to the 3 yard, um, I ended up staying in the gym, and I forgot a few of the homeboys that I had known there, hooked me up with a CD player, some clothes. So I was only there. I didn't have time to get a package, excuse me, anything like that. But a couple homeboys from Mesa that I had known, you know, still hung out with me, even though I was a Christian. They would always tell me though, we'd be sitting down the yard, we'd go down, something would happen. Be like, hey fool, if something jumps off, he's like, you're still gonna jump in, right? And I would be like, yeah, you know. Inside, I'm like, hell no, I'm not gonna jump in. I'm going home. Like, I want nothing to do with this place. But anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and end this one here. And I think I'm just gonna continue on and maybe talk about my transition and what my experience, because at the age of 29, I had been I started getting locked up at 15, right? And here I am at the age of 28, 29, but I was still kind of like a 16-year-old, you know. My my development had been hindered by so many things, um, that I was deficient in so many areas of my life. Sometimes I feel like I still am. I still am. But yeah, my transition was hard. And as I look back, man, there's you know mistakes that I made along the way, that I've learned from. But that's what I think I'm going to talk about next. When I got out, and then how my transition was from living that life. Because again, you know, I got away with a lot of the serious things that I did. My rap sheet was all, just the stupid stuff, that I did because of my addiction to heroin. Drugs will make you do things that you said you would never do. You become the person who you never thought that you would become. Um, so like, car theft, residential burglaries. I was big into that when I was 16, 17, and residential burglaries. It wasn't until my uncle Toro got out, and that's another story. And I started selling heroin for him. We were slinging a lot. And that's going to be another story. Um, yeah, I was 17, when I was slinging heroin. Um, but I'm gonna go ahead and end it there. I hope you guys are enjoying, my story. It only gets better. All right. So I'll see you guys next time. Boom, boom.